Hey everyone, Mark Meckler here, president of Convention of States, and as you can see, I'm snuggling my very little tiny puppy here. Okay, so he is a puppy, but he's not tiny. If you didn't see last week's episode, you didn't meet him yet. This is Doc, our new secondary official mascot. Winston, of course, is the primary official mascot. He's here in the background. Can you see him? He's back behind me on his bed back there. And this is his new tormentor and little brother. This is Doc, named after our friend Senator Doc Coburn. And Doc is now 13 weeks and 40 pounds. So I'm not sure how many more weeks we'll have of Doc being a lapdog when we start the show. Because when he's 60 or 80 or 100 pounds, this probably won't work. He'll probably still want to do it, but I probably won't. So anyway, Doc, say hello. There you go. Don't eat the hat. All right, say goodbye. We'll put you down. Lay down. Relax. All right, lots going on this week. It is an exciting week in Convention of States world, aside from Doc the puppy, which is exciting. There's a lot of stories to cover, but I want to give you an action item this week that I think is pretty easy, actually, and I hope you do it. And that is make sure that you watch the inauguration. And I don't normally say that. I actually don't care all that much about inaugurations. In fact, I don't like inaugurations, generally speaking, because it almost feels like a coronation of a king, and it doesn't seem like something that we should be doing in a self-governing nation. All the pomp and circumstance and the music and the banners, whatever, all that stuff, I don't generally like that stuff. But the reason I think you should watch this inauguration, and the reason I'll be watching this inauguration, is because history is being made. And I really think this is history. I think we've reached a turning point in American history, and I think it's a positive turning point. And I think that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, long after I'm gone, you, maybe your kids, your grandkids are going to look back and think, man, that was a turning point. And you want to remember what that was like. I think it's going to be a wonderful inauguration. I expect big crowds. Patty and I did get invited, but we got a new puppy at home. And by the way, 3 other dogs in the house, 3 Great Danes and a Bernie Doodle. So it's a little crazy around here. We couldn't make it to the inauguration. To those of you who invited us, we really appreciate it. We had tickets to all the fancy stuff. But as you can see, I'm not really a fancy guy anyway. And I'm dressed in my cold weather clothes. I know it's going to be cold there. It's cold all over the country. We got a big cold snap sweeping here into the northern Austin area, all over probably Texas. And so I'm dressed for it because I've been in and out with the puppies. And also, I was in watching today or listening to the South Dakota hearing. This week. So South Dakota, really cold, obviously. So I am in my cold weather gear in honor of that. Let's hop into the news. And there is hot news this week, a bunch of hot news. I think one of the top news stories, other than the coming inauguration, is that SCOTUS ruled on the TikTok case. If you're not familiar with this, Congress passed a ban on TikTok in the United States, as they should. TikTok is actually an open and known tool of the Communist Party in China, the CCP. They use it to collect intel on America and, by the way, to spread really bad stuff in America. The version of TikTok that you and I see in America, well, I don't see it because I never watch it, but the version that's apparently so many people watch is not allowed in China. So all the stuff that you see about the weird gender ideology and the LGBT and abortion, all the bad stuff that's bad for our society, that's on TikTok, that's not allowed in China. That's banned in China. They put it here because they're trying to pollute our society. This is part of the Chinese operation to destroy America. And then they also collect data on all of those users. So if your kids are on TikTok, data is being collected on them. And you might think, well, I don't really care about that. They're just kids. What kind of data are they going to collect? The answer is they're going to collect stuff so that they know exactly who your kids are, what they like, what they're doing, when they're doing it. And if your kids do anything that's maybe sketchy on TikTok, which unfortunately a lot of people do based on today's morals, the Chinese government's going to have that on your kids. So maybe your kid runs for the House of Representatives 20 years from now, 15 years from now. They're going to have everything your kid did on TikTok. And so Congress issued a ban, said that TikTok, unless it's sold to a U.S. entity with no connections to the Chinese Communist Party, no data flow to the Chinese Communist Party, then TikTok had to be shut down in the U.S. That ban goes into effect today, Sunday. That's it. It's on the books. Now, the question is, as with every law, is the federal government going to enforce that? And the enforcer, the ultimate law enforcement officer in the United States of America, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump came out with a statement and he said, let's see what I'm going to do. And I don't really know what he's going to do. He's been on both sides of this ban. He's been pro-ban. He's been anti-ban. it depends on whether TikTok is favorable to him or not favorable to him. So I'm a little bit worried about it. I hope that the ban goes in effect and stays in effect. This is an important decision for American national security. It's going to be a big test on Trump, essentially on day one. He's going to have to make this decision right away, whether to ban TikTok or not. I hope he goes through, lets it be banned. I don't mind. Look, sell it to a U.S. entity. Let's get some non-Chinese influence on TikTok. Let's not have their algorithm polluting our kids. Let's see if we can get it cleaned up. I'm not against free speech, but I am against free speech being used against us by foreign entities like the Chinese Communist Party. So that's an important story to be watching this week. Donald Trump's going to make the difference on that story. We're going to have to see what he does. Speaking of Donald Trump, obviously he's taking over for Joe Biden, the outgoing president, and the outgoing president sat down behind the Resolute desk right there in the Oval Office, this big, beautiful, impressive desk that's been sat behind by so many presidents, and delivered an address to the nation, and it was Joe Biden's farewell address. Normally, presidential farewell addresses are lofty things. They talk about big ideas, soaring rhetoric. They talk about past accomplishments and the bright future for the United States of America. Instead, I don't know what Joe Biden was doing. I don't know what Joe Biden was thinking. Actually, I do know what Joe Biden was thinking. What Joe Biden was thinking is, I want my pudding. Like, that's what he was actually thinking, because I'm sure they promised him his pudding when he was done reading off the teleprompter. But he talked about the TikTok ban and his, our social media stuff. I mean, he talked about irrelevant stuff. The social media stuff he talked about, he didn't like it, that Facebook would no longer be censoring people. This is what he used his farewell address for. It was small, it was petty, it was bumbling. I felt like the speechwriters who had to write it for him were on their way out the door. They're like, yeah, here's something for you to read before we leave. I think that's what you're getting out of this administration, though they are lighting as many fires as they possibly can on their way out the door. His address is just another example of the incompetence. He came in incompetent. He had a totally incompetent administration, did incredible damage in the world. He's going out incompetent. Joe Biden, what we have to say to you as you gave your farewell address and as we inaugurate President Trump is, don't let the door hit you in the the proverbial black side. So we're glad he's gone. Hopefully that's his last major address. I have a feeling you're going to see him gone here before too long. He's had the best healthcare in the world, keeping him alive, keeping him cogent. I don't think he's going to have that as much after he's president. I expect that we will see another former president lying in state maybe before the year is out. All right, let's talk about international relations with Biden leaving office, Trump coming into office. Things are being juggled all over the world right now, jumbled up, changed for the better, in my opinion. Donald Trump said, and I believe not facetiously, that the United States should buy Greenland. Now, that sounds weird and outrageous. The United States buying another part of another country. Apparently, I didn't know this, but Greenland is part of Denmark. Did you know that? I mean, I found out about that in the last couple of weeks, but I didn't know that. I just thought Greenland was Greenland. I thought it was its own country, but apparently it is part of Denmark. And there are roughly, I've heard different numbers, but between 45 and 65,000 people that live there in a country that's bigger than Alaska. I mean, this is a huge, huge, huge land. I say country, a protectorate of Denmark. Denmark is a country that has financial problems of its own, can't really do very much to protect Greenland. We, the United States, provides Greenland's military protection, and there's not much of an economy there. People really suffer there economically, and yet rare earth minerals are there in abundance. There's all kinds of resources there in this gigantic land. It would be a great idea for the U.S. to have Greenland as part of the United States. Now, how does that work? Well, first of all, I actually think that these folks in Greenland should decide for themselves. It seems like the majority of people in Greenland favor independence from Denmark. Doesn't seem like they get much from Denmark. And not necessarily becoming part of the U.S., but actually entering into very serious agreements with the United States. I think that could be beneficial for the United States, beneficial for Greenland, and get it off Denmark's books because they can't afford it anyway and they're not doing anything with it. I think this is a realistic possibility. I think Trump means it realistically. It's important for our national security as far as the rare earth minerals, as far as its location at the Arctic, because apparently There's a lot more shipping now going across the Arctic, and this is how we protect Arctic shipping lanes. I think we need Greenland, and I think we ought to do what it takes to bring Greenland into the fold. And I think over the next 4 years, with Donald Trump at the helm, I think you're going to see that happen. This is serious stuff, and it's not a joke. This is not Donald Trump just throwing out there something facetiously or farcically. I think it's real, and I think it's going to happen. We had more political news. We had Governor DeSantis of Florida named his AG as the new senator from Florida. And then he took his chief of staff and made his chief of staff the AG. This was an adept political maneuver. And I think you're going to have a new great senator from Florida, another female senator in the Republican Party. She seems very articulate. Ashley Moody, very articulate, very well-spoken, very intelligent, very successful. It seems like a great move for DeSantis. I really like it. He gets his chief of staff as the attorney general. So he has a loyalist in the attorney general's position. That means he can continue to pursue his work against a broader federal government, not against Trump, but against the deep state federal government, and probably working in conjunction with Trump. I think it's a very good move. And I think it's just DeSantis positioning himself probably for a run at the presidency in 2028. I think there are a lot of people who are going to be running for president in 2028. I saw a rumor, I guess you could call that an unsourced rumor, in the Washington Post this week, saying that Vivek Ramaswamy is positioning himself to run for governor of Ohio. And that would mean, from my perspective, also positioning himself to run for president of the United States of America. So super interesting stuff in the jockeying going on in politics all over the country. I don't know what's going to happen out of this stuff, but one thing I can say for sure is that DeSantis has proved himself once again, in my opinion, to be the best governor in the United States of America, and a senior executive of a state who actually knows what he's doing, is actually competent at what he's doing. Speaking of governors, not necessarily competent ones, Gavin Newsom has done something that seems unbelievable, unbelievably good, actually, which is rare. You would not normally say that with Gavin Newsom. He has ordered the flags in California to be raised from half-staff, which is where they are, for a month when a president passes away, and that's Jimmy Carter passed away, and you probably forgot already, because he's no longer the worst president in American history. Joe Biden's taken that, but he passed away. He was in state in Washington, D.C., and now the flags are flying at half-mast, and I think they're going to be flying at full mast or all the way up all over the country. Governor Abbott here in Texas ordered that the flags go to full mast for the inauguration. And now, Gavin Newsom. What? Like, what? Why would he do such a thing? And I think what Gavin Newsom is doing is he's making a play for the middle. I don't know if you watched him talking about regulations in California, and he's going to remove red tape for people who have to build. Now he's going to remove the red tape, right? I left, at least partially, because of all the insane red tape. We all know there's insane red tape in California. For him, it takes an hour. It takes a fire that has gone on now for days, and it'll probably go on for weeks, and wipes out over 10,000 homes to remove the red tape. Now he does that because he's tacking to the middle. He wants the Republicans to vote for him. I think you might see a red wave in California in the next election cycle. Will voters remember for 2 years from now that the mayor of Los Angeles abandoned them in their time of need, created a woke DEI bureaucracy in the fire department that was unable to serve them, cut the budget, prevented the fire hydrants from operating, et cetera, et cetera? Will they remember that Governor Newsom oversaw all this in San Francisco and across state? Will voters remember that 2 years from now? I'm not so sure. I don't generally hold out a lot of hope for hardcore blue state voters, but maybe. And Gavin Newsom obviously tacking to the middle, raising the flags for Trump's inauguration. I think that's the right thing to do. I think every single state should do that. Now, over the last week, I think the most interesting thing we've seen over the whole week is what I would call the confirmation constellation. What I mean by that is all the stars that are having their hearings, their confirmation hearings before the United States Senate committees. And I think we've seen some incredible things. I think we saw Pete Hegseth perform what I would argue was the best confirmation hearing, at least of my lifetime, that I've seen. He was solid. He had subject matter mastery. He was calm. He was likable. He was deferential to the extent he should be deferential, yet he had a stiff enough spine to stand against the madness, mostly from Democrat women. And by that, I also mean Senator Tim Kaine among the Democrat women. Mostly the women who attacked Hegseth, attacked his character. People have no right to attack this man's character. A guy who won 2 bronze stars, then 2 tours of duty. But Hegseth performed beautifully. And to be frank, he was even, it was a redemption story, right? He proved that he understands as a man that he had failed in the past. He'd been unfaithful to his wife. I think he described himself previously as a serial cheater, but he's been married for a long time now to his wife, Jen. They have 7 children across their marriages together. I know Pete personally really well, and I know him as a man I would trust in battle, with my family, in my home, and he was a superstar in this hearing. Next, you saw Pam Bondi. I don't necessarily mean next in order of superstardom. Part of the Constellation, Pam Bondi did an extraordinary job in her hearing, and she took it to the radical left, and she scored the points. Really amazing to watch these confirmation hearings, and there were a bunch more. I can't go through all of them, but Marco Rubio, another one, did a stellar job pointing out what a Make America Great Again, America First foreign policy will look like with him as Secretary of State. And I think it's going to be extraordinary. I think it truly is going to be Make America First. There's something I've noticed about Trump's appointees, and this may seem shallow, but I actually think that it is important in this era of television politics. And that is all the people that he's picked that are going up for these confirmation hearings, at least the ones that I've seen, are all telegenic. And what I mean by that is they look good on TV. They present themselves well on TV. They look like somebody you would want to know on TV. They look friendly. They look sharply dressed. They are attractive people. And I'm sorry, but that's the reality. You might not like that. That's what we need in today's world in politics. You might not love the fact that that's how it works, but that is how it works. And Trump has picked telegenic people like Pete Hegseth, like Pam Bondi. I think Marco Rubio is none of those folks are going to struggle in front of the cameras talking to the media ever. They all know what they believe. They're all articulate. They're all good looking. They're all well presenting. And I think this is incredible. Compare that to, for example, our soon to be former, Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, a man, and a very ugly, overweight man dressed as a woman, right? I mean, that's who you're comparing them to, people like that. And you've got senators on the left attacking people like Pete Hegseth as unqualified when you have people who are mentally ill who were actually cabinet secretaries or assistant cabinet secretaries during the Biden administration. Or remember the guy who was in charge of nuclear waste disposal? I forget his name, Sam something, dressed in, he's bald-headed, red lipstick, red dress. Yeah. And then Pete Hegseth, he's the problem, right? Or Pam Bondi, she's the problem. Marco Rubio, he's the problem. The reality is this is going to be, I think, the best cabinet in American history. I believe this is going to be the best administration in American history. I'm super excited about it. That you have been watching and should continue to watch what we call the confirmation, Constellation, the hearings of the stars of the Trump administration. So it's been a good week from that perspective. It's also been a great week for Convention of States because we have now, I think, 45 legislatures in session. We've got stuff moving all across the country. And really, first out of the gate, I'm excited to report this week was the South Dakota State Government Committee in the Senate heard our resolution. We've always had support in the South Dakota Senate and the South Dakota House, always had big support there. We've always been stopped by leadership. And this shows what happens when tyrannical leadership is removed. Because we went before this hearing, we have new leadership that supports Convention of States, and we passed, I'm so excited about this, after 10 years of fighting, we passed that state government committee 8-1. That's right, 8 votes for, 1 against. We're going to go to the floor next week. I think it looks pretty good for that. We don't have an official date or anything yet, but I think we're going to be on the floor in the Senate next week, and I expect we're going to pass. I'm super excited about that. To the team there, I've got to say, you guys have been on the ground in the fight, especially, I have to say, congratulations to Shirley Meyer, who's been leading that team for a very long time, longer than anybody should have to be in the fight. You've been in the fight, Shirley. pretty much as long as me. God bless you for leading that team. To our regional director, Deanna Beckett, thank you. You grew up in that state. That's your home state. That's where you were when I first met you. You're now one of our regional directors, but you're a star in your own right. To Dave Schneider, who was the regional director there for a long time, who left Convention of States, now out doing his own consulting and lobbying practice. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that you were there all those years on the ground. You and I driving through the snow, flying into Pierre last minute to get to those hearings. We passed this week. I'm super excited. Next week, hopefully on through the Senate and before the end of the month. I'm hoping, I'm predicting, I'm praying. We're going to get through the House and South Dakota maybe become state number 20. Good week for convention states. Lots of other stuff going on. I was in Nebraska last week. I was there because we're working on removing the sunset clause in Nebraska. There's 2 states with the sunset clause. Nebraska has one. We need to remove that. That's up in 2027. I think it looks good. I had good conversations with legislators while I was there. The grassroots are strong. It was great. And then we've got Texas, my home state. Texas, big legislature, messy, complicated. It only meets every 2 years. But I think we've got great sponsors in the Senate and the House. Cody Vasut in the House. In the Senate, we have Brian Birdwell, who sponsored us in the past. I think we're going to get across the finish line with a fresh, clean resolution without a sunset clause. And that will leave precisely 0 states with a sunset clause, which that is exactly how it should be. So that's this week. And next in Convention of States. We're going to move on to Q&A, but before we do, I want to remind you, if you like what you see on Sunday nights, if you like the BattleCry, then make sure you ask your friends to subscribe. And make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button yourself if you haven't already done that. Hitting the like button is what helps us get more traffic, helps us spread this further. Telling your friends about it, of course, spreads it further. Share this with all your friends. Like, subscribe. And don't forget, by the way, sign the open letter to Donald Trump. We'd love to see Donald Trump come out and publicly support Convention of States. J.D. Vance does, Vivek Ramaswamy does, Pete Hegseth does, Brooke Rollins, who's going to be our Secretary of Agriculture, does, Caroline Leavitt, who is now going to be the incoming press secretary, does, and many more. We want Donald Trump on board himself. Go to conventionofstates.com/Trump, conventionofstates.com/Trump. Let's ask Donald Trump to support the Convention of States resolution. All right, let's go to the questions. Remember, if you want to ask me a question, you can ask Mark anything, literally anything. Go to conventionofstates.com/ask Mark, conventionofstates.com/ask Mark. Put in a question. I will answer it. Let's see. Carol Petrusowitz says, in order to stop all the shenanigans of the outgoing administration, is there a way under reigning in the federal government clause, the Convention of States could propose an amendment to change the November elections to December and keep the inauguration date the same, or keep the November election date the same, change the inauguration date to December 1st? Carol, I think that's a brilliant idea. I don't know exactly what the solution should be, but there should be something to prevent all this lame duck madness that goes on after a president and administration and a Congress know they're out. There should be no major things allowed. I don't know what the right method is. I think it takes time for a new administration to get ready to come in. So shortening that period, it may not work, but we need to find some way to hamstring the outgoing administration once the American people have made their will clear. So I agree with you in concept. I'm not sure that's the best solution, but yes, absolutely. That can be discussed and should be discussed at a Convention of States. Annie Polito says, I understand illegal immigrants are taking advantage of our birthright citizenship law, and that's wrong. If we get rid of it, will children born to parents that are already American citizens still have birthright citizenship? And the answer would be yes, absolutely, Annie, because the question about birthright citizenship is whether people are subject to the laws or jurisdiction of the United States of America, and people who have parents that are already citizens, those parents are subject to the laws and jurisdiction of the United States of America. They don't have any kind of dual loyalties. They're not under the laws and jurisdiction of another country. So yeah, the kids born to citizens would still have birthright citizenship. So I don't think you have to worry about that. But I don't think that the United States Constitution provides for birthright citizenship in the way that the left has used it. I think we're going to see that cleaned up during the Trump administration. Joe asked, what happened with COS in North Carolina? I thought it passed. Joe, breaking my heart, man. It should have passed. I agree with you. It passed the House. It's passed the House multiple times. We didn't get a vote in the Senate. And I thought we were going to get a vote in the Senate this year. Last year, very frustrating to me. I have high hopes for this coming year, but I always start with high hopes. I think we're going to pass the House again, no problem. I do think the Senate looks better. I think we have stronger support among the Senate leadership. I think we get it done. I will predict we get it done in 2025, but we just literally never even got a vote. So it's not that you were wrong. You were wrong in that it didn't pass, but we didn't lose either. We never got a vote. All right. Troy Ogilvie asked the question, or says, President Trump announced he's planning a constitutional amendment for term limits on members of Congress and to remove the extreme influence of the deep state. What does that mean for Convention of States agenda for the future? Troy, I think it's really good for our agenda. And the reason that I say that is because Congress will never propose a term limits amendment. Can you imagine 2/3 of both houses of Congress proposing a term limits amendment? They're not going to do it. So President Trump can want that, but it's not going to come out of Congress. It's only going to come out of Convention of States about calling a state-based convention. And this is why I think President Trump speaking about this is so good, because he's going to be frustrated. Congress isn't going to do it, and he's going to come to us. And I believe we're going to see President Trump's support before the end of 2025. So that's what we've got going on at Convention of States right now. There's lots of exciting stuff coming up. You're going to see hearings announced regularly over the next couple of months. I'm going to be at as many of those as I can. Rick Santorum's going to be at them. Mike Farris is going to be at them. I think we have a hearing next Friday in Montana, I want to say. So watch for that one to come on. I think we'll be testifying by video there, not live, but the grassroots will be there live. Keep an eye on Convention of States. Watch us all over the place. Wherever you watch us, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to our feed, and share with your friends. And I will see you next week. And maybe Doc, who's sleeping down there, maybe he'll have put on another 5 or 10 pounds, and I'll put him in my lap. I'll do my best, and we'll both see you on the BattleCry next week.